Jonathan Haidt currently serves as professor of ethical leadership at New York University. His academic area is social psychology. You might think it odd that an ethics class, a discipline usually classed with philosophy, would consider work in social psychology. I find his work useful, though. Coming from the side of science, he's starting with a descriptive account of how moral systems work around the world and in a variety of cultures. He sees a common concern with righteousness, with rightness, the desire to be right and to encourage or even sometimes enforce rightness in the people around us. Perhaps you've experienced those phenomena for yourself. At least since David Hume, an 18th century English philosopher, philosophers have recognized the difficulty in moving from descriptive accounts of morality to prescriptive or normative accounts. They found a logical problem between accounts that say what is the case and what should be the case. If you were to read Haidt's work for yourself, you'd find that he mostly ignores this philosophical problem, motivated, I believe, by his experience of ordinary people who also ignore that philosophical problem. At the core of Haidt's study is a claim that morality is about more than issues of care and harm. Perhaps you've heard people defend their actions by saying something like, "But I didn't hurt anyone." A system in which this claim works is a system in which the moral life is centered on issues of harm. Harming another is the only criterion for identifying an action as bad or wrong. This conviction is very strong in our culture. It's so strong that it's very difficult to overcome. As we'll see, we work hard to present situations and actions that we feel are wrong, and yet there's no obvious harm as actually constituting harm in some way when we look closely enough or explain it right. What Haidt will do with his moral foundations theory is explain our moral sensibilities as having multiple bases, not just harm. He begins with some shocking illustrations. Imagine you have a family dog. Let's call it Fido. Fido has been a member of your family since your childhood. When you got Fido as a puppy, Fido was always there to greet you when you got home. In 12 years, Fido has been a part of your family. Fido has always been reliable, loving, and cheerful. One day, Fido, for some reason, is outside in front of your house. A driver, maybe careless, maybe distracted, happens to hit Fido. Fido dies. As it happens, you and your family are not just dog lovers, you're also carnivores. You eat a variety of animals: chickens, cows, turkeys, sheep. Fido is just one more animal. Instead of letting the meat go to waste, you cook Fido and serve him for dinner. After all, Fido is dead. Fido won't mind. No one is harmed. What do you think of this story? What's your gut reaction to the idea of eating Fido? This is one of the stories that Haidt tells. He also tells us another story. There's a guy who buys a frozen chicken each week, takes it home, has sex with it, then cooks it and eats it. The chicken's dead, so it's not harmed. The man is not harmed. Again, Haidt asked the question, what's our gut reaction to this story? Late in his academic training, Haidt came to the study of cultural anthropology. By looking at cultures around the world, he began to see that moral cultures could be very different. While morality might often deal with issues of harm, most moral cultures dealt with matters other than harm as well. In fact, as we'll see, there were some cultures where the moral domain had issues that we, with our harm-based approach, didn't even think of as having to do with morality. Richard Schrader was the psychological anthropologist that Haidt studied with at University of Chicago. Through his field work in India, Schrader came to differentiate between cultures that were sociocentric, that is, centered on the group, and those that were individualistic. those that are centered on individuals. While rationalist approaches might work in individualistic cultures, they failed to account for the morality that we find in sociocentric cultures. Haidt set up a test of his hypothesis that morality concerned more than just harm. His main tool was the use of harmless taboo violation stories, like the two we started with. While no one is harmed, that's the key point. It's harmless taboo. It's something that's taboo, something we don't do, but harm's not involved. While no one is harmed in the eating of an already dead dog or having sex with a frozen chicken before cooking it, the people in his tests responded negatively to those scenarios. Each involved, from common Western perspectives, clear taboo violation. We don't believe in eating our family pet. But nothing at all was related to harm. Haidt did these surveys in the US, an individualistic culture, and in a sociocentric culture in South America, to make sure his theory worked cross-culturally. He found that the West was so used to thinking of morality as harm that the feeling that something immoral was happening in these stories required at least some of the respondents to invent a harm that was taking place so they could say that it was wrong. Antonio Damasio is a neuroscientist on the faculty at USC. He's best known for his work on the connection between emotion and reason. His best known book is Descartes' Error. It has that name because René Descartes, an early modern French philosopher, was one who emphasized the importance of reason. We've already seen that Descartes was by no means the first to exalt reason over emotion. That 2,000 years before with Plato. But Descartes is widely considered the father of modern philosophy, so he's worth Damasio's focus. Additionally, Descartes' brand of rationalism led directly to the mind-body problem, the assumption that because the mind and the body are two totally different kinds of things, they cannot really be connected. For Descartes, the mind was res cogitans, a thinking thing, while the body, occupying space as it does, was res extensa, extended thing. Mind and body, two completely different kinds of things. Damasio was fascinated with the face of Phineas Gage. Gage was a 19th century laborer injured while at work. Well, injured may be putting it mildly. He had a steel rod driven through his head. Now we'd think that such an injury would be immediately fatal, but it wasn't. Gage lost sight in one eye, but otherwise seemed fine. Well, at first, his mental faculties seemed unimpaired, but his emotions were messed up. Because his emotions were messed up, Damasio talks about how his reasoning was also going wrong. His reasoning didn't work anymore. Damasio has three central claims in his book. Some root claims: number one, the human brain and the rest of the body constitute an indissociable organism, integrated by means of mutually interactive biochemical and neural regulatory circuits, including endocrine, immune, and autonomic neural components. Number two, the organism interacts with the environment as an ensemble. The interaction is neither of the body alone nor of the brain alone, both together. And number three, the physiological operations that we call mind are derived from the structural and functional ensemble rather than from the brain alone. Mental phenomena can be fully understood only in the context of an organism's interacting in its environment. That the environment is, in part, a product of the organism's activity itself, merely underscores the complexity of interactions we must take into account. Now let's take this apart a bit. First, the brain and body go together. They work together on several levels. Second, The whole person as an organism encounters and interacts with the environment. It is never the case that it is only the mind or only the body that experiences the world. Third, the thing we call mind emerges from the interaction of the total organism and its environment. There are therefore no purely mental phenomena. I'll add a fourth that is there in the third point. Because humans are always enmeshed in their environments, the distinction between the person and that environment is not absolute. In his book, Haidt describes a series of experiments. Each was designed to challenge decisions and judgments of those being tested. They ranged from roach juice to selling souls to incest to eating parts of a cadaver. Haidt's conclusion from these experiments? He considered Plato's claim that reason is in charge. That doesn't seem to be true. People couldn't give good reasons for their judgments. He also considered Thomas Jefferson's model that required reason and emotion. Haidt was predisposed to think this would be the right solution, the right model for understanding how our minds and our moral thinking works. But again, the experiments didn't go that way. In the end, David Hume's position that reason serves the emotions, serves the passions, looked to be accurate. People offered reasons, but the reasons were rooted in their gut feelings, not the other way around. Human reasoning followed our desires and actions rather than reproducing them or producing them. One of Haidt's primary metaphors is that of the rider and the elephant. Just look at an elephant, how large and powerful it is. If the elephant wants to do something, it's going to do it. When there is a rider working with the elephant, meaningful work can be accomplished, but the elephant is doing the bulk of the work. Haidt looks at philosopher Joseph Margolis. Margolis' work shows a distinction between the acts of judging, in other words, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, and the act of justification. The act of judging is what happens immediately. That's the elephant in the metaphor. Judging is when we say, this is good, this is right, this is bad, this is wrong. Justification is the articulation of reasons and explanations for the judgment that we've already made. Justification is the rider of the elephant. We say that things are right or wrong, good or bad, without always being able to articulate the reasons why it is so. We humans, this research shows, have two information processing systems. Both are at work all the time. Both, as we see in the case of Phineas Gage, are necessary. They complement each other. But the emotional system, being nearly immediate, is primary. Our reasoning processes, operating more slowly, are secondary. Here's a visualization Haidt has created to show the whole metaphor. Take a bit of time to consider it. See the elephant there? See how much larger, more powerful the elephant is than the rider? For Haidt, the elephant equals the impulsive mind. The rider is the rational mind. And the path that the elephant goes on, that's the environment. Note that Haidt's account is a descriptive account. It's an attempt to describe the way the human mind works. It is not a prescriptive account, saying this is the way things ought to work. This is a distinction between his work and most of what we see in major ethical theories. Ethics, whether deontological or consequentialist, spends most of its time on the prescriptive or normative side, saying what ought to be. Personally, I'm convinced that this is a weakness of too many ethical theories. Both the descriptive and prescriptive ought to be considered and included, as we develop our ethical theories. There is a difference between a descriptive thesis, a thesis that says this is how the world or some aspect of the world is, and a prescriptive or normative thesis that says this is how the world should be. According to Haidt, the first principle of moral psychology is that intuitions, gut feelings, immediate reactions come first. Strategic reasoning, the justifications, the reasons that we offer, come second. This is the formal way of talking about the elephant and rider metaphor. The elephant, the powerful and large animal, is our intuitions, our gut reactions. The rider, the small figure that tries guiding the elephant in the productive way, that's our reasoning. This is a descriptive thesis, a claim that this is how things are, the way humans work. It's not a claim, again, about how things should be. Haidt says, brains evaluate everything in terms of potential threat or benefit to the self, and then adjust behavior to get more of the good stuff and less of the bad. When you get to the utilitarianism PowerPoint, you'll encounter the psychological hedonism thesis. You'll notice that Haidt's claim here sounds very similar to that thesis. The claim is that when we look at humans, we see the brain responding in terms of threat and benefit. Notice there's a difference in language between Haidt and hedonism. Hedonism speaks the language of pleasure and pain, not benefit and threat. While there is significant overlap between the two, they're not exactly identical. Benefit is broader and more complex than pleasure. Likewise with threat and pain. Before the rider hops on the elephant, before reason starts engaging with our intuitions, however, pleasure and benefit, pain and threat are much closer together. Haidt's claim is that this work of the brain is automatic, or nearly automatic. It's much faster than our reasoning processes. The trolley problem is a thought experiment created by philosopher Philippa Foot in 1967. The basic idea, and there are many, many variants and many jokes to go with them, is that there is an out-of-control trolley. It is headed towards some people. It will kill those people if it is not stopped or shunted onto another track. In some tellings, you are the trolley driver. You can let it go forward and kill those people, or you can shunt it to the other track where it will only kill a single person. In other tellings, you're on a bridge and you can push a fat man off the bridge to stop the trolley and save the people. One of the ways of changing the scenario is to stipulate that one of the people involved, say one of the people the trolley looks like it will hit and kill, is your child or some other person you know and care about, not just a stranger. How would that change your reasoning? Haidt includes the trolley problem here to show again how our moral intuitions, our gut feelings, our reactions, our instincts about right and wrong precede our reasoning about right and wrong.